Waking up early. Most billionaires wake up before the sun rises. Not because they have to, because they've learned that the first hours of the morning belong entirely to them. Before emails flood in, before calls start, before the world makes demands on their attention. Jeff Bezos wakes around 7 a.m., but he protects his mornings fiercely, refusing to schedule meetings before 10. Tim Cook wakes at 4 a.m. Oprah Winfrey uses her early hours for meditation and stillness. The habit isn't really about the time on the clock, it's about ownership. When you wake up early, you're choosing to lead your own day instead of reacting to someone else's. You get to think clearly before noise crowds in. You get to set intentions. Most people start their days already behind. Billionaires start theirs ahead, reading every single day. Billionaires read constantly. Warren Buffett estimates he spends 80% of his working day reading. Bill Gates finishes roughly 50 books every year. Elon Musk taught himself rocket science largely through books. This isn't casual browsing. It's deliberate, focused absorption of information. You might think successful people are too busy to read, but they see reading as the work, not a distraction from it. Every book is a compressed version of someone else's lifetime of experience. You absorb decades of thinking in a matter of hours. Over time, that compounds. Your understanding deepens. Your decisions improve because you've already thought through similar problems inside someone else's story. Reading doesn't make you smarter. It makes you less ignorant, which is harder to do than it sounds. Protecting deep work time. Billionaires guard focused time like it's a physical resource they can run out of. Because it is. Bill Gates famously took think weeks twice a year, completely isolated, no meetings, no calls, just uninterrupted thinking. Elon Musk time blocks his schedule into 5-minute segments, treating every moment as allocated. Cal Newport calls this deep work, the ability to concentrate without distraction on something difficult. Your brain can only sustain real cognitive effort for limited periods. Shallow tasks feel productive but rarely move things forward. Deep work is where breakthroughs actually happen. The problem is the modern world designs itself against it. Notifications, open offices, constant availability. Billionaires push back hard against that pull. They create space where real thinking can happen. You can too if you choose to protect it. Obsessive goal clarity. Successful people at the top of their industries don't just have goals, they have frighteningly specific goals. Not, I want to grow my business. More like, I want to reach 10 million in revenue by Q3 of next year through these exact 3 channels. The specificity matters enormously. Vague goals produce vague effort. When you know exactly where you're going, your brain starts filtering every decision through that lens. Jeff Bezos wrote his resignation letter before he quit his job to start Amazon. He called it a regret minimization framework. He imagined himself at 80 looking back. He asked himself what he would regret not trying. That kind of clarity isn't motivation, it's architecture. You're building a mental structure that makes the right choices feel obvious and the wrong ones feel obviously wrong. Exercise as non-negotiable. Almost every billionaire exercises consistently. Mark Zuckerberg trains mixed martial arts. Richard Branson kitesurfs and plays tennis daily. Jeff Bezos lifts weights. Barack Obama worked out for 45 minutes every morning during his presidency, even on the hardest days. They're not doing this for aesthetics. Exercise affects how your brain produces dopamine and serotonin, the chemicals that regulate mood, focus, and decision-making quality. When you exercise regularly, your prefrontal cortex functions better. Your stress response becomes more measured. Your energy levels stabilize across the day rather than spiking and crashing. The people running billion-dollar organizations can't afford to think poorly. Physical health isn't separate from mental performance. It's the foundation of it. If your body is struggling, your thinking suffers whether you notice it or not. Surrounding yourself with better people. Billionaires are obsessive about who they spend time with. Warren Buffett says you become the average of the 5 people closest to you. He's spent decades curating that group intentionally. This isn't about using people or networking in a transactional way. It's about recognizing that environments shape thinking. If everyone around you accepts mediocrity as normal, mediocrity starts feeling normal to you too. If everyone around you is building something extraordinary, your standards shift upward without effort. The conversations change. The problems discussed change. The possibilities that feel real to you expand. Most people inherit their social circle by accident, by geography or circumstance. Billionaires tend to build theirs on purpose. They seek out people who challenge them, who've solved problems they haven't solved yet, who see the world differently, sleeping without apology. There's a persistent myth that billionaires don't sleep. That hustle means running on 4 hours and grinding through exhaustion. The myth is wrong. Jeff Bezos is publicly adamant about getting 8 hours. Arianna Huffington built a media career partly around arguing that sleep deprivation is a form of self-sabotage disguised as dedication. LeBron James, one of the most successful athletes alive, sleeps up to 12 hours. Sleep is when your brain consolidates memory, clears metabolic waste through the glymphatic system, and restores the neural pathways that decision-making depends on. When you're sleep-deprived, your amygdala reacts 60% more aggressively to negative stimuli. You make worse choices. You're more impulsive. You misread situations. The billionaires who perform at elite levels long-term aren't sleeping less. They're protecting sleep like it's a competitive advantage. Because it is. Journaling and reflection. Many of the most successful people alive write things down. Not for an audience, for themselves. Oprah Winfrey has kept a gratitude journal for decades. Richard Branson carries notebooks everywhere and credits much of his business success to writing ideas down before they fade. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in ancient history, wrote private notes to himself that became meditations. Journaling forces your thinking to slow down enough to become visible. You stop reacting and start understanding. Patterns emerge. You notice what's draining you, what's actually working, where your assumptions are getting you stuck. 5 minutes of honest reflection before bed tells you more about your own performance than hours of vague worry. The goal isn't beautiful, prose. It's clarity about what's actually happening inside your own decisions. Learning from failure loudly. Billionaires fail more than almost anyone. Elon Musk watched SpaceX rockets explode repeatedly on public launch pads. Jeff Bezos built products that bombed spectacularly, including the Fire Phone and Amazon destinations. James Dyson went through 5,126 failed prototypes before his vacuum worked. The difference isn't that they fail less, it's that they extract information from every failure before moving on. Most people experience failure as a verdict. Something went wrong, therefore something is wrong with them. Billionaires tend to experience failure as data. Something went wrong, therefore they now know something they didn't know before. That reframe isn't just psychological comfort. It's strategically accurate. Every failed attempt narrows the possibility space. You know one more thing that doesn't work. That knowledge is genuinely valuable if you choose to use it. Saying no constantly. Successful people protect their time through refusal. Warren Buffett says the difference between successful people and very successful people is that very successful people say no to almost everything. Steve Jobs famously measured Apple's success not by what the company built, but by what it chose not to build. The ability to say no requires clarity about what matters most, because every yes is a no to something else. Your time and energy aren't infinite. When you say yes to a meeting that doesn't move your most important work forward, you're saying no to something that would. Most people say yes because it feels polite, because they fear disappointing someone, because they haven't clearly decided what they're protecting their time for. Billionaires tend to have decided, and that decision makes the refusals easier because they're not choosing between two things. They're choosing between distraction and purpose. Investing in mentors and knowledge. Billionaires spend money on learning without hesitation. They hire coaches, pay for masterminds, seek out advisors who've solved bigger versions of the problems they're facing. Mark Zuckerberg sought out Steve Jobs as a mentor when Facebook was still young. Bill Gates credits much of his early success to advice from Warren Buffett. This isn't insecurity, it's efficiency. Learning from someone who's already made the mistakes compresses years of trial and error into conversations. You stop paying for lessons in wasted time and pay for them in tuition instead, which is almost always the cheaper option. The unwillingness to invest in knowledge is usually disguised as saving money, but it's actually spending time, which runs out in a way that money doesn't. Single tasking over multitasking. Billionaires tend to work on one thing at a time with total attention. Not because they have fewer responsibilities, they have far more. but because they understand that multitasking doesn't exist the way people believe it does. Your brain can't truly focus on two cognitively demanding tasks simultaneously. What feels like multitasking is actually rapid task switching, and every switch costs attention residue, a mental echo of the previous task that lingers and pollutes the next. Research suggests this residue can reduce cognitive performance by as much as 40%. Tim Cook manages one of the most complex companies in human history by working through problems one at a time with full presence before moving to the next. The productivity isn't in doing more things at once. It's in doing each thing completely. Creating systems over relying on motivation. Billionaires don't trust themselves to feel motivated. They build systems that produce results regardless of how they feel on any given day. Warren Buffett has automated his investment principles into near-mechanical rules that remove emotional decision-making from the process. Jeff Bezos built Amazon's culture around written documents and review processes that function independently of any single person's energy or mood. Motivation is a feeling. Feelings are unreliable. They spike after a good night's sleep or a motivational speech and collapse during hard stretches or after failure. A system keeps working when motivation disappears. You don't wonder whether to go to the gym. You've already decided. The decision happened once. Now the system handles it. That's the leverage point most people miss entirely. Taking calculated risks. There's a significant difference between reckless gambling and deliberate risk-taking. Billionaires understand this difference at a level most people don't. Elon Musk put nearly every dollar he made from selling PayPal into Tesla and SpaceX simultaneously, when both companies were genuinely close to failing. He'd done the math. He understood the downside scenarios. He'd prepared for them. Risk isn't something to avoid. It's something to understand well enough to price accurately. When you avoid risk entirely, you're not playing it safe. You're accepting a guaranteed worse outcome in exchange for comfort. The question billionaires tend to ask isn't, "Is this risky?" It's, "What's the actual probability of each outcome, and what do I lose or gain in each scenario?" That's not bravado. That's arithmetic. Giving attention to health as performance. Beyond exercise, billionaires increasingly treat their bodies as high-performance systems requiring precise maintenance. Jack Dorsey practices intermittent fasting and cold exposure. Brian Johnson spends millions testing biological optimization protocols. Tim Ferriss experiments relentlessly with sleep, diet, and supplementation and documents everything. This isn't vanity. It's the recognition that your physical state determines your mental capacity. When inflammation is high, cognitive performance drops. When blood sugar swings, decision-making quality degrades. When you're chronically stressed without recovery, your prefrontal cortex function declines, and your amygdala reactivity spikes. You start making fear-based choices instead of strategic ones. The body isn't separate from the business. It's the instrument through which every decision in the business gets made. Billionaires tend to treat it accordingly, thinking in decades, not quarters. Short-term thinking produces short-term results. Bezos famously told shareholders from the very beginning that Amazon would sacrifice quarterly profits for long-term position. That commitment cost him enormous criticism for years and ultimately built one of the most valuable companies ever created. The ability to delay gratification at an organizational or personal scale is extraordinarily rare and extraordinarily powerful. When you think in decades, minor setbacks stop feeling catastrophic. Slow periods become investment phases rather than failures. Decisions that look costly in the short term reveal themselves as leverage points over time. Your brain naturally pulls toward immediate reward because that's how it's wired for survival. Overriding that pull requires a clear enough picture of the future that waiting for it feels worth the discomfort of not having it now. Continuous reflection on identity. The deepest habit shared by people operating at this level isn't a morning routine or a reading list. It's a continuous, almost uncomfortable willingness to question their own thinking. Buffett changes his mind publicly. Gates admits mistakes in his annual letters. Ray Dalio built an entire philosophy around radical transparency and having his own decisions stress-tested by others. The willingness to be wrong without having that wrongness feel like an attack on who you are is what allows rapid learning and course correction. Most people defend their previous positions because changing them feels like losing. Billionaires tend to experience changing their minds as winning, as proof that new information has arrived and been properly processed. That's not a personality trait you're born with. It's a practice you can start today if you decide that being right matters more to you than feeling AER.